But if you can't put bats in roofs without causing house fires, if you can't build school halls without rip-off after rip-off, why would you be confident that they could do this?
Well, let's talk about school halls. When you talk about the waste in the government school building stimulus program, the Orgill report investigating claims of waste in that program found that there had been complaints related to 2.7% of all schools that have benefited from the program. That's 254 schools out of 7,900 schools where there were complaints. That presumably means there were no complaints at all from 7,650 schools for a program designed to bring benefits to schools and underpin the economy, provide jobs, keep the construction sector going. Is that really the disaster you've painted it to be?
But every single complaint that was investigated was found to have substance. Now, at the very beginning of the Orgill process, Mr Orgill made it clear that he could not guarantee the anonymity of complainants. We know that there has been a great deal of institutional bullying of school principals who have gone public with this. I don't think anyone can assume that just because only 2.5% of or thereabouts of people complained that there were no problems anywhere else. Those 2.5% of public complaints, I think, are the tip of this iceberg.
Well, you're making assumptions yourself. The Orgill report found that of the 254 schools there were complaints, half those complaints related to money. That brings it down to 125 schools out of 7,900 where some money, not all of the money spent, where some money might have been wasted. Yeah. Do you acknowledge that?
Well, what I do state, Kerry, is that the Orgill report found that the cost per square metre across the board was vastly higher than the building standard.
5 to 6%?
No, in New South Wales, the cost per square metre, the average cost in New South Wales public schools was something like $4,500 per square metre. It was something like $3,500 per square metre in Victorian public schools. The industry standard is more like $1,500 a square metre. Catholic schools got it for about $2,000 a square metre, just on what the Orgill report found. Plainly, value for money was not being achieved. And in some cases, the cost per square metre was vastly higher. We had $25,000 per square metre in the case of some of these canteens.
More broadly on the economy, your campaign slogan focuses heavily on labour debt. But Joe Hockey acknowledged at the Press Club on Monday that if the coalition had been in government for the global crisis, you too would have had to run a deficit. How big a deficit? And can I ask you not just to say smaller than the government's? How big a deficit would you have run?
But we weren't in government. We are not in government. We would have pursued different policies. I can't say exactly what the deficit would have been with those different policies because we didn't get the chance to put those different policies into place. But what we have said all along is that the second stimulus was too much too soon. I suppose, had a premonition, if you like, Kerry, that the home insulation program and the school halls program were going to turn out to be disasters, and we were right.
So it'd be very lucky for you if you have these wonderful premonitions through government that you're able to rely on.
Well, as I said, we will bring
government by
an orthodox, sensible, prudent approach. We respect the taxpayer dollar. And, you know, you've got the Prime Minister in the face of the Orgill report saying that a bit of waste doesn't matter. Wrong. It always does matter. And saying that you do exactly the same thing again. Well,
but it's much better to learn from these
things, surely, Kerry.
If you accept a principle, and I'm sure there were lessons to learn, I would imagine there would have been lessons to learn for any government spending a lot of money, whether it's that much or somewhat less, a lot of money quickly to do programs that are going to underpin jobs. I would imagine, did you at any point in coming up with the criticisms you have of the government, did you at any point think to estimate or try to calculate what waste it would represent to the economy and to the nation if 200,000 people had been put out of work, and the cost that would have imposed back on government, or the loss of the use of Australian resources to contribute to the economy?
Kerry, you're assuming that this spending spree is what kept us out of recession. You should not make that assumption. There was just a bigger spending spree in the United States, and that didn't keep them out of recession. And there is a lot of economic evidence, economic authority, most recently Professor Tony Makin, saying that it was not the stimulus that was responsible for keeping us out of recession. It was much more the monetary policy pursued by the Reserve Bank and the depreciation of the Aussie dollar.
And there are many other economists who say it's both. But when you analyse Labor's debt compared to what yours might have been, $110 billion was caused, over the forward estimates of that, was caused by the loss of tax revenue due directly to the global crisis. That was $110 billion that would have otherwise come into the Treasury coffers that didn't. That would have happened no matter who was in government. On top of that, Joe Hockey confirmed on Monday that the coalition would have supported something like $25 to $30 billion in stimulus measures. That's all of the first one, plus he said 15 to 20 billion of the subsequent one. Now, the combination of those two would have put a coalition government with the loss of revenue deeply into debt.
Well, that's still $20 billion worth of debt that wouldn't have been racked up. And when you add to that the kind of reductions in borrowings that we've identified in this campaign, that is a very significant hole in the $90 billion worth of debt that this government will have, and the $6 billion worth of interest repayments that would fund an enormous number of schools and hospitals that we will be saddled with in 2012-13.
But you are not taking into account, when you say that, when you talk about, I mean, part of the savings you talk about is to wipe out the national broadband network. Now, what you don't do is take into account how much more the national broadband network might contribute to national productivity and to the future of this nation in all kinds of ways, more so than what you're going to implement yourself.
And Kerry, the point I make is that what's affordable with a $20 billion surplus is quite different to what's affordable with a $57 billion deficit. And this is a government which only knows how to do one thing, and that is to borrow and spend.
But that's
and you
not
cannot
entirely
borrow
true,
and
Mr.
spend
Abbott.
your way out of trouble. There are times for consolidation. There are times for prudent incremental change rather than these big bang spending sprees, which is what we always get from this government.
But you're talking about the big bang spending sprees. The big bang spending spree would have been $20 billion more than your big bang spending spree that Joe Hockey has already acknowledged a coalition government would have spent. And in fact, if you're fair, you would acknowledge that before the global crisis came along, the Rudd government also delivered a budget that was more than $20 billion in surplus.
Which they did not deliver a budget. They did not deliver a budget outcome. Sure, they told us.
Because the global financial crisis came along.
And they started spending.